All right, welcome back to Views and Vibes. We're talking about the split between poetry and hip hop. Did it ever exist? And what caused that split? And before we went to break, we were talking about how poetry in the late 90s, early, new millennium really began to take off with deaf poetry, and then like movies like, what was the movie?
Love Jones.
Love Jones and stuff like that. It really began to take on its own life. With that happening in the late 90s, did the split begin to happen because of that shift in attention away from hip hop and more into poetry? And one of our guests here was actually on deaf poetry. Patrick?
Yeah. Don't put it on me. Don't
You're on there a couple times, right? So is this really your fault? It is your fault.
Okay.
No, but go ahead.
No, no. The answer is no. It's not my fault. And hip hop, I think, informed a lot of the young poets, sensibilities and the way that they did their thing.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think that's what happened. Ultimately, that's what happened. Hip hop influenced the new generation of poets.
Okay.
That's my short
And so did that take the poets away from hip hop because they figured now I can just focus on my particular art form and I don't have to, worry about the whole hip hop thing?
I definitely think that poetry became more accepted in the artist community, especially amongst like males. Before it's like poetry, you write poetry, and it's like, nah, poetry's dope.
Right.
And then people got into that more. So I think it definitely opened up the realm of poetry where people were just fine with being poets instead of always trying to be MCs. But
also the whole aspect of spoken word poetry as opposed to just the writing part.
Right.
It has
performance poetry,
Right.
all of those different.
Now people have more of an outlet for the poetry, and they don't have to worry about actually, rapping.
But I think that's the thing. I think there was a divide between like your poet and your MC, and there's some people like me like that fall in the middle. And I would a lot of times when people introduce me as a spoken word artist, I'd be like, oh nah, I'm not a spoken word artist. Like, but because of the content, but because of the content, people assume that that's what I was doing. But I do think that that's what happened. I think you have your literary poets. You have your like Maya Angelou, your Nikki Giovanni, your Robert Frost, those type of people who wrote poetry that was beautiful because when you read it, it painted a story for you.
Right.
So it wasn't something that needed to be performed. It was something that you could read and be like, I'm a woman phenomenally, phenomenal woman. That's me. It was not something that needed to be performed. But then you get Janet Jackson and Lorenz Tate, like all these different people doing all these poetic justice, and like then it's like, oh, poetry's performance, and now it's it's hot. Because number one, hey, you might get a spouse or something from that, but also too, then I think performance poetry became like the thing for not everybody, but for some people who kind of wanted to be MCs, but might not necessarily have wanted to take that jump.
Right.
Spoken word gave them that element to be able to be like, well, I could sort of rhyme, but I'm doing poetry.
So by people actually moving towards, those poets moving more towards poetry and spoken word and the whole performance aspect of it, did that leave the door open for people who are less lyrical to step into the hip hop realm?
That's a good question.
Wow.
That's a good question.
Wow, you're blowing my mind.
I think so.
Hey, welcome to my world.
Yeah, I think it sort of merged. I think it did happen that way because of the fact that nobody knew that hip hop was gonna be this big thing.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because it was something that started out in infancy. It was something that was like, again, it was something that was personal that then people saw and was like, oh, okay, I see how I can market that, and I see how I can do that. So I definitely think that. I think that it was like, it no longer became a requirement for you to necessarily have to craft something amazing for people to listen to, as long as it was catchy and it had has a formula. It was like, oh, well, people will party, taking it back to the element. So that the original element is kind of there, but so now we don't have to concentrate on much about why they were partying. They were celebrating for a different reason.
Yeah, I also think that that there was also this whole movement to like the beats where you didn't have to listen to the lyrics anymore. There was a whole, like back to kind of like the party. We just like the bass and you know what I'm saying. And it's like people stopped listening to what someone was saying. You know what I mean?
People were rewinding.
Like, even now when you listen to some stuff on the radio, you like it's like people like, yeah, just jump off the roof and kill yourself. Everybody's like, yeah, just jump off the roof and kill yourself. You're like, you're not listening to anything they're saying.
Right.
You know, and I'm just saying, I think that people's, their spirits stopped listening to the words and just started listening to a beat, and that took away from it. And it allowed anybody else to come and just say anything over a beat.
So that brings me to the other question: do people actually miss the poetry in hip hop? Do people? I mean, if you're older, but understand we're becoming an older generation. You know, the generation behind us now, who are the ones consuming hip hop. You know, whether they're white or black or Asian or Latino. That generation is the one that's more so paying to go to concerts. That's paying for the music, downloads and everything. Do they even miss the lyricism? Do they even know lyricism even really existed in the first place? And so, in saying that, does it even really matter anymore?
Oh, you're making me sad. Sad. I would say, there was a period of, apathy, of regarding lyricism. And, but I feel like, I look at my kids, you know what I mean? And I know my kids are gonna know, a good lyric from a bad one. You know what I mean? So
because you're an informed parent, though. And you have a lot of people out there who aren't informed parents, who came up, listened to whatever, who thought MC Hammer was the man, and now their kids are going to grow up thinking that, I'm not going to say any names, but think that other person's the man because their parents aren't telling them anything different. I know you can teach your kids that, but a lot of parents aren't going to sit down with the kids and say, you know what, that's awful, you should listen to this over here.
Right, I'll say some names like Gucci Man and all of them.
If you want a name drop.
Right, but I would say there are great and wonderful young MCs. One, because we, a lot of the folks who are from our generation still try to pour back into those communities. Secondly, I think that it's just important that we do discriminate and start to have an opinion about what we should accept and what we shouldn't accept.
We get old.
Well, I'm saying, but even young people, like, they should have opinions, like having opinions about what's whack. Say this whack. I don't like it. I'm not going to accept everything into my world and into my brain. And just to encourage art, because it's definitely there's going to be another rising of young people who are going to spit the truth. Like, we're living in times now where, if you can survive these times, what you're going to have to say is going to transcend all of the foolishness that's going on, because these are historic times we're in right now.
But like you said too, this has been taken over by a machine. Will that machine allow those people to actually rise, or they continue to crush them and keep them in the underground? But we'll talk about that when we come back from break. Another break, right? Come back, watch this, Views and Vibes.